Hello and welcome to another show, An Eye on Israel. Today is a very special one for me and special one for you, because today's guest is a surprise one, in many ways sharing an untold story of the state of Israel. Our encounter begins a year ago when I had a phone call with Israel's former Consul General in San Francisco, who told me he had just returned from a visit to Anchorage, Alaska. And there, he toured the Alaska Jewish Museum, where the leading exhibit was none other than the showcase of the airlift of Yemenite Jews to Israel, the operation which was named On Eagle's Wings in 1949 and 1950 from Yemen to Israel. In Alaska, you ask? I asked the same question. And it turned out that the airplanes that were responsible for this Herculean mission and monumental change on world stage were none other than Alaska Airlines. And it were Alaska Airlines crews who were doing those missions from Yemen to Israel. Captain Elgen Long, retired Captain Elgen Marion Long, was one of those crew members, those brave men and women who were responsible for these flights. Elgen Long was born on August 12, 1927, in McMinnville, Oregon. He received an AA degree in aeronautics from the College of San Mateo, California, and studied aircraft accident investigation at the University of Southern California and the Norton AFB Crash Laboratory. Between 1942 and 1946, he flew over 100 U.S. Navy combat missions in seaplanes during World War II as radioman and navigator, including Howland Island patrols where Amelia Earhart disappeared. In 1970, Elgin and his wife Marie began an over 40-year investigation of Earhart's disappearance at Howland Island. Elgin has a 60-year flying career that totaled nearly 45,000 hours without accident or violation. He is a winner of the FAI Gold Air Medal, Outstanding Sports Pilot in the World, the Institute of Navigation Superior Achievement Award as Practicing Navigator, Airline Pilots Association Award for Outstanding Airmanship, Franklin Harris Trophy for first solo flight around the world over both poles, the NAA 2004 Crystal Eagle Award for Lifetime Achievement in Aviation, a holder of 15 aviation world records and firsts, 2009 FAA, the Wright Brother Master Pilot Award for 50 years of dedicated service in the aviation safety industry. In 2012, Elgin was inducted, and rightly so, by the Oregon State Board of Aviation into the Oregon Aviation Hall of Honor. Elgin played a significant role in the early stages of operation On Eagle's Wings, and he is today the last surviving member of Alaska Airlines crews who brought the ancient Yemenite Jewish community back home on Eagle's Wings in 1949. And I am so proud he is our guest here at JBS Eye on Israel today. Thank you very much, Elgin, for being here.
Thank you very much, Shahar.
This is quite outstanding. You've had an incredible career, an unbelievable background, and we can dedicate our program today to a variety of issues. But allow me to start by asking you the simple question. What is your personal background as it relates to the Yemenite Jewish airlift? What's your family? Have you ever had connections with Israel, the Jewish people?
No, I had no connections, and I was raised on the Oregon coast in a small town of 300 population where everybody knew everybody, and we had no Jewish connections at all. My mother was a Christian Scientist, and I was raised, we didn't have two churches in town. We only had one. It was Methodist, so I went to Sunday school in the Methodist church. And I really had no connections with the Jewish people in my early life. But I did have a very, very interesting and very, very wonderful life as a child on the Oregon coast, being raised there.
But no synagogues, no Jewish community centers, no rabbis you encountered
whatsoever.
as a child. So let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
In your very, very impressive an inspirational bio. It's mentioned that you joined the Navy. How old were you when you joined the Navy?
Well, I was 15 years old, but I
Is that even
really,
legal to join the Navy at 15?
no, you have to be 17.
Yeah.
But I was really very old for my age. I seemed to learn quick, and I had advanced in grades above my age, and so it appeared that I was older than I was, and I matured quite early, it seems. And the Navy accepted me as being 17, and my folks gave a certificate to them and wrote to them that I was 17 years old, but I was really only 15.
And you wanted to join the Army at that point?
Well, it was in the Navy that I joined, and my brother, my older brother, who was 6 years older, he had joined just a couple, 3 weeks before, and my folks believed that it would time, if I went at that time, he would be there to be able to help me along if I needed help.
And how often did you meet when you were in the Navy?
I never saw him for at least a year after I joined the Navy.
And you served in the Navy for 6 years?
No, I was in the Navy till 1946, about 3.5 years.
Right.
I joined the Navy in August on my birthday and took the oath of office in Portland on my birthday in 1942, which was about 9 months after the war had started.
Right. And at that point, what time did you leave the Navy? At what age?
I was 17 years old. I was old enough. In fact, I just had my 18th birthday, and in January of 1946, I was discharged honorably from the Navy after 3.5 years of service during World War II.
And continued to do what?
I continued my education and under the GI Bill, and was able to actually catch up as if I never lost those 3.5
Straight
years.
from the war. And at what point did you join Alaska Airlines?
I joined Alaska Airlines in the first part of 1948. And we were flying the North Atlantic out of Westover Air Force Base in Massachusetts, supporting our strategic atomic bombing airplanes. B-45s were stationed in Laken Heath, England, flying back and forth between Westover and England. I was a navigator for Alaska Airlines, but in January.
And how old were you when you at that point?
At that point, I was only 20 years old.
20 years old. And can I ask you, an all-American boy who's got nothing to do with the Jewish people in the state of Israel, who works for Alaska Airlines, ends up rescuing the ancient Yemenite Jewish community and bringing them home to Israel after thousands of years of exile. And I have to say, my family as well, who came on eagle's wings on those planes. How did that come about?
Happenstance. I have no idea the circumstance. It just happened. At the end of 1948, I was transferred to Everett, Washington for Alaska Airlines to fly as navigator across the Pacific. They had a new contract flying between Tokyo and the United States. And so I was transferred there, and I made a trip in January of 1948 to Tokyo and back, and then I made a second trip to Tokyo, and while we were there, they said, when the airplane comes, don't bring it back to the United States. Instead, take the airplane and fly it to Hong Kong. The cablegram came to our captain, Captain Larry Curry, and of course we followed orders and did what the company told us to do. When the airplane came in, we flew it to Hong Kong, and we landed at Kai Tak and checked in the hotel and waited for further orders.
And what were these orders?
The orders were to leave Hong Kong, fly up to Shanghai, and pick up a load of passengers and fly them to Israel.
Load of passengers from Shanghai to Israel, and who were they?
They were white Russians, Jewish people who had been in the Shanghai ghetto, and they were still in Shanghai, and they wanted to make the trip and join the Israeli forces now that there was an Israel. Israel was only months old at that time. And
so at the age of 20, you were already part of this incredible geopolitical earthquake in the world when the state of Israel is reestablished and reappears, and as you call it in your book, On Eagle's Wings, the ingathering of the exiles. You bring them not only from Yemen, but also from Shanghai.
Well, I was 21 at the time, and Captain Curry and I and the rest of our crew were honored to do it. And it was we were going to fly to places we had heard of in history books and whatnot, but never had been to. And so it was exciting for us too. And we actually joined in the excitement with our passengers of going to Israel, the new country.
What do you remember of the Jewish refugees who came on the plane in Shanghai?
We had a bit of a problem. They had arrived in China, some of them many years before, but they were not Chinese citizens because they came as stateless people, and China did not give them citizenship. So almost all of them were stateless. They had no passports. They had no country to protect them or anything. They were just an individual person. And we were advised that Israel was at war with the Muslim Arab countries, and that we must not fly over any Muslim country and land there, because if we had an emergency, it would put the passengers at great risk.
Sure.
And we figured out also, they said, though, that we could land at a British Royal Air Force station, and they would service us and allow us to pass on through without question.
Right.
So we found that Bangkok was suitable for us to land at, but we had trouble flying from Shanghai to Bangkok without stopping. We couldn't carry all the passengers and carry enough gas to reach there.
Because of the weight of the freight.
Well, it was because we had to fly at night over Cambodia and Vietnam, and that was not allowed. Only daylight flights were allowed. But by the time we left Shanghai, it would be dark by the time we got to Vietnam and Cambodia. In the nighttime, you had to fly around them, and it was 30% shorter if you went direct, and we didn't have enough fuel to go around. So I added 30% with the captain's permission to our ground speed, and we reported as if we were going around while we were really going straight across, but it all worked out like we arrived at the right time at the right place, and we arrived at Bangkok without any difficulty.
Right. And how did you manage the weight? Did you encounter anything interesting about the Jews who came on the plane in Shanghai when it comes to...
Well, it really wasn't funny but it was humorous at the time. When they came from the terminal building out to the airplane, they were only allowed one bag, 44 pounds maximum weight, because we had 48 passengers plus some young children, and we were at maximum gross takeoff weight for the airplane. So it was natural. It wasn't cold, but they had on a shirt, and they had on a sweater, and they had on an undercoat, and they had on an overcoat, and they'd have 3 or 4 hats on top of their head. They were obviously wanting to carry as many things with them on the airplane as they could. And that was completely understandable.
Of course. And at what point does the Yemenite airlift start? When do you first arrive in Aden, the port of Aden?
The first time we arrived with that first load was in, actually the war was still on at that time.
Right.
And the airport was under a security expecting an attack of some sort.
About Ben Gurion.
So they turned off all the lights, wouldn't answer the radios, and they were under military control at that time. We arrived, and there was no lights. The tower wouldn't answer us, no contact, but we knew we were near the airport. So Captain Curry kept flying around trying to find a runway, and he did find a runway and was able to make a good landing on it. Actually, it was
without communicating.
Without communications, no lights, no runway lights, pitch black, no moon. He did an excellent job. And we came to a stop on the runway, but we'd never been there. We didn't know what to do. And then we noticed there was lights coming, and it was probably, we hoped, to follow me that would guide us to where to go and park the airplane. Well, when it came up by the captain's side of the airplane and stopped. And instead of people getting out with a ladder or anything, it was people getting out with guns. It was an armored car. It wasn't a follow me, and they didn't know who we were. Captain Curry opened his side window in the airplane, and they yelled up, "Hey, who are you?" And he told them that we were from Shanghai, China, with Israeli Jewish refugees.
Right.
And they got a ladder and put it up the airplane, and one of the officers, probably the senior officer, came up into the airplane, the cockpit, and to question Captain Curry and make sure what we said was true. And it was. And I remember when he finally decided that we were legitimate and that these were people, we had brought them all the way from Shanghai on their aliyah to Israel. I remember, I can hear him saying it right now, "It is a good thing you have done." And he turned left, and then they guided us to a parking place, and we offloaded the airplane.
And his words remain with you to this very day.
To this very day, I can close my eyes and hear him saying it.
And we can hear it with you.
Because we just were doing a job, and that was the first time that anybody ever suggested that we had done something really unusual.
And then you're headed back.
I'm back to Shanghai and made another load.
And when did Aden start, the Yemenite airlift?
We arrived in Tel Aviv, and we arrived just at the end of the ceasefire. There was not a peace agreement yet, but there was a ceasefire. Nobody was supposed to shoot at anybody anymore, so they said. And we arrived and we offloaded, and we had cablegram from the company, Alaska Airlines in New York, that said, "Stay in Tel Aviv for further orders." And we were in Tel Aviv for 2 or 3 days, and Captain Curry finally received a cablegram that told us to leave our 2 flight attendants, we called them stewardesses in those days, leave our 2 stewardesses in Tel Aviv, and just the male crew members fly to Kormaxer Royal Air Force Station in Aden, go back to there, and wait for further orders from there. We didn't know why. We didn't ask any questions, but we did leave our stewardesses and flew to Kormaxer.
And you get to Aden, and you find out that you're bringing more Jews to Israel.
Well, yes, it was a surprise to us when we landed and climbed down of our ladder out of our airplane. The commanding officer, Mr. Captain Keynes, was there on the tarmac to greet us, or there on the ramp to greet us, and that was unusual. Usually the commander of the base didn't meet every airplane that came in. And he started talking to Captain Curry and started asking questions, and finally told us why we were there. He said, "You're going to receive orders from your company to help us here. We have a problem. And the problem is we have about 2,000 Yemenite Jewish people who are refugees and have arrived here illegally, and we can't take care of them. Some of them sick. We don't have a hospital to take care of.
And these are people who marched through the desert in Yemen all the way to the Aden Protectorate to seek refuge from the Arabs who were attacking them as a result of Israel's reestablishment.
We found out later, yes, all those things. But they were in great danger to be where they was. There had already been over 80 of them had been killed, and others had died. Some of them were very ill, and they had contacted the Israeli government, said, "You have to help these people get out of here. It's a matter of life and death."
And you're a man on a mission. So at this point, the plane only has 58 seats.
It was 48.
48.
Yes.
And you want to make sure that as many as possible are able to come on board to take them to Israel. What did you do?
Well, we couldn't exceed our weight of the airplane. It would be dangerous. So we had to find a way. We found out that some of them, they were in small stature. Most of them didn't even have shoes, let alone full clothing in the Western sense. It was a warm desert territory down there. And they hadn't eaten, many of them, in a week, and some of them sick and hadn't eaten longer even. We asked him, how much do you think the average one weighed? And he said, well, a lot of them are children, and some of them are babies, and probably maybe 80 pounds apiece. And so we multiplied 80 times their weight and how much weight we could have. We with the fuel we needed and with the oil and our crew, we figured we could carry 150 of them. But there was only 48 seats, and of course the ones under 2 could sit in their parents' lap, but that was only the babies and the young ones.
So you got rid of the seats?
Well, it was suggested by one of the crew members they take the seats out, and then we could get more people in.
And these people were seeing an airplane for the first time.
They'd never seen an airplane.
Yeah.
They had no idea
what
it
did you see when they were coming? Did they come easily on board, or?
Well, we had another problem. With 150 people in the airplane, they weighed 12,000 pounds, which was fine. We could carry that. But if it were a freight, we could tie it down. But without seats, we couldn't tie them down. And we had the problem, we could not allow them to go towards the rear of the airplane, or we would lose control of the airplane. The weight would overcome our ability to control it. And one of the gentlemen one of the crew came up with the idea, well, I can put a cargo net right at the entrance to the rear of the entrance door, and would tie it all up real good and have their rabbi tell them they cannot touch that cargo net and under no circumstances go behind it.
So you're saying the rabbi, in the sense you sensed their spirituality? Did you see how connected they were to Judaism at the time when you met them?
At that point, because they really didn't want to get on the airplane. They didn't know what it was, and they were afraid of it, and that's understandable. So the rabbi finally reminded them of their biblical prophecy that they will return to Israel in their aliyah on the wings of an eagle.
I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself.
And that's first we'd heard of this, but they understood that, and that was part of their teachings and they'd been waiting thousands of years to return to Israel.
And you are part of that redemption, Elgin.
Well, we didn't know it at the time. We were just doing a job, and it was a matter of saving their lives.
You keep on saying you were doing a job, but the truth is you weren't a soldier at the time. You were a member of Alaska Airlines crew. And you were talking about the cablegrams and the orders, but you did it. You didn't complain. You flew for very long hours. You slept very little. You got the job done. What made you do it?
Well, it was the right thing to do. These people were going to die if we didn't get them out of there. And if we only carried 75, we'd be leaving 75 behind that were in danger. And so we knew we had to, just human being, that we couldn't leave them there to die. So as much as we thought was reasonably still safe, we allowed them to come in as long as it kept the airplane within the limits of its capabilities and our capabilities.
I can imagine the flights themselves were challenging in a sense, and I wanted to ask you about, did you ever want to have a cup of tea on the plane?
Well, actually, we did have box lunches and things serviced, not with tea, but the Yemenites needed, some of them were used to having tea also, and it did occur one time. We had a B compartment where we had 2 bunks where we could take turns at resting. We always kept at least 2 people awake in the cockpit at all times, but we got some sleep en route. And I opened the door into the cabin to check to make sure that everybody was all right and there wasn't some panic of some sort going on. And I noticed they were grouped around over the top of the wing, a group of men, and I wondered what they were doing. And I noticed they had looked like a kerosene stove. And then I noticed they had a teapot on top of it, and it was burning. And it was right over the gas tanks. So I had to go back and put the kerosene stove out and make them understand
That wasn't a
no
good
tea
idea.
today. Later on, when you get to Israel, you can have tea.
Amazing. When you think about your history, when you think about the role you played in the ingathering of the exiles back to Israel, the Jews from all over, how does that make you feel?
Well, we felt good, but we were just doing what anyone would do under the circumstances.
And yet, from the 50,000 Yemenite Jews who came during the operation, you had spawned over hundreds of thousands of people, families all over the world, owing their lives to you. Because if it hadn't been for your courage, bravery, and playing around with the rules to make it happen, they would have ceased to exist with the local hostility. You have created a monumental change in history, Elgin.
Well, we really didn't realize that at the time. We were saving individual lives as our focus was. We didn't have the knowledge to focus on the future that far ahead.
But maybe today I'll ask you.
All right, sir.
So many young people are watching us. They're listening to your outstanding story. They're going to be getting your book on Eagle's Wings. What do you want to tell them? What's your message?
Well, the message really is what everybody really knows is within them. They have to have respect for other people and their humanity. And if it comes to a matter of life or death, you must help them, or to help them in any way that you can. And I think most people do. I mean, that's just part of being a good human being.
Captain Long, you're an inspiration to all of us. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be in your company. And today was not only a taste of what was, but really listening to Captain Long, we understand what we need to do. The realization that we can believe in ourselves and our ability as individuals and a society to do the right thing towards one another. And if we only believe in our power to make a difference, to change reality, we will be able to. When you speak, Captain Long, we all sense that the wings of history are upon us, and the realization that whatever it is that we feel that needs to be done, we can get it done. Not because it's such a huge thing to do, but because it's the right thing to do. And I want to thank you on behalf of JBS and on behalf of the State of Israel and the Jewish people for the role you played in resurrecting our nation, and for the fact that so many out there today owe you their lives, for their kids and grandchildren, and the goodness that you have bestowed upon us with your courage and bravery, you and your teammates. Thank you, and thank you on behalf of my grandparents, who were fortunate enough to come back to Israel because of the risks that you took upon yourself to make sure they get there. Thank you for your humanity, Elgin.
Thank you very much for
And
the
thank
honor.
you. Thank you to our viewers and the JBS for allowing the platform to tell yet one more incredible story of the State of Israel and the realization of the Zionist dream in the Jewish state. It's been a pleasure. To learn more about Elgin's incredible story and to really live through that reality of the time through his eyes, I highly recommend you get a copy of this book, On Eagle's Wings by Elgen Long. He tells that story so vividly, with so many details. The photos in the book and the history shall take you on a journey that you will never, ever forget. For inspiration is the name behind this book. Thank you again.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.